They are serious about that clock. We're already ticking. All right, so good morning, everyone. Thanks to Craig, Maureen, Faraz, John, and everyone that has a hand in putting this together, and thanks to my panelists for joining me here. I think we've got a bunch of aspects of the capital provider and investor ecosystem lined up here to provide that perspective. So everyone here knows how difficult the fundraising environment has been for life science companies the last few years. We've suffered this prolonged COVID hangover. And I think the people here on stage have advised companies from other stages like this and in private on how to extend runway, leverage partnerships, do anything they can to stay alive. But I think much less talked about is the pressures that we feel from our side as investors and then how that filters down to the ecosystem. So I thought maybe we could peel back the curtain today and discuss some of those challenges as it impacts the innovators, hopefully, and then come up with some ideas and have a discussions around how we can move that forward. Some of these issues that we've been facing is a lack of liquidity, persistent elevated interest rates, all leading to capital concentration at mega funds, investors looking later stage at de-risked assets, some VC investors looking at public markets at the expense of private markets, again, all filtering down and impacting the innovation ecosystem. So with that, the capital stack, the seed, the A, the B, all the way to crossover in public market investing is kind of critical and central to the way we think about funding companies and innovation. And at the heart of that is venture math, which I think goes underappreciated, though we all spend a lot of time thinking about how to make our returns. Emmett, me, you, and Faraz have had this conversation over drinks before. Could you share with the audience here just a very basic description of what venture math is and why it's so important to us as investors?
Yeah, I was trying to think what you were referring to when you said venture math, because I've never heard the term. Are you talking about how we make our returns work?
Exactly. So if we're investing $500K at a very early stage company, how are you going to make your return on your fund work?
Yeah, it's a very complex question, actually, because wherever you invest in the innovation cycle, your return typically comes at a different point. Most people who do pre-IND investing don't hold to commercialization. They just can't afford to hold to commercialization. Those who do phase 3 have to hold to approval and or commercialization to see the value inflection point. So, because the failure rate is greater in the earlier phase, you have to have a higher return per win, right? So the math is different for each segment of the innovation cycle at its highest level of understanding. Maybe you could give me a more specific question and I can dig in beyond that.
Well, I think that's a great setup to discuss, if an innovator is out there raising their seed round at a preclinical level and they're talking to you as an investor and you're looking at the total addressable market and you're saying there's no way I can hold this long even though this innovator thinks that the company is worth this. Because you need to make a return on your fund, right? What's the net fund return to go out and be able to raise the next fund? That's also kind of core to the venture math as we talk to LPs.
Yeah, I guess maybe I think about it a little bit differently. And the greatest frustration for all the innovators is that they have ideas. They almost always, by definition, are early phase, because the mid to late phase stuff gets done by big companies where the money is and where they can afford to do it. So they're a long way away from commercialization. They have a long way to go, and there's a high failure rate. And it's very costly. The problem is, unlike tech where you can have 10 failures and 2 wins, we can't afford that. We have to have mostly wins or we lose, because our returns are not 100x, they're not 20x. A 10x in an investing career is very, very, very uncommon in life sciences. Most of the wins are 3 to 6x, that's the wins. And so as you start to do the math, you definitely can't have more losses than you have wins. And so part of the very simple math is that in life science investing, you can't lose, even though it's an incredibly risky business. And so you get investors who don't want to come in early because they know it's a 10% success rate at that phase. And if you're really good and you have a really great idea with genetic support, et cetera, maybe it's a 30% success rate pre-IND, and that's exceptional. But then you're barely making money. So this is why people all but the most brave do not do early stage investing, unfortunately.
I'm
Is
reminded.
that the math you wanted
That's
me to go
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm reminded of the previous panel that talked about select stupidity or something like that. Yeah, I think we have that here. Garrett, that's a perfect segue. Visionaries raising their next fund, as reported in the press. How are you thinking about the environment and venture math as you're thinking about how to build that next fund and where to focus?
Yeah, it's changed a lot in the last, I think, 3-4 years post-COVID. When we first got into this business, the thought was that you could get a company through phase 2B study and get significant data, and a strategic would come in and buy and want to run the phase 3. That has largely changed, and it's kind of diverged into two camps, the way we see it. One is you'll have to get commercialization or get FDA approval, and for that, you can get a nice return, especially if you're getting revenue, then you can look at an 8 to 10x times revenue for an exit price. There's good comps in the market for that. Or if you go for FDA approval, then you might have some nice backends and a good upfront. The other side of the coin is we're seeing like the iBios or the ONLs where they're getting phase 1B data that's really strong and good, robust studies. We're seeing the Mercks, the J&Js of the world willing to go early for those types of assets, but what's unique about those is they're really big shots on goal, meaningfully improving in the standard of care or creating a new market. That's the stuff that can go early. The smaller kind of marginal improvements in the standard of care, that's going to have to go the whole way and show adoption in the commercial market. So that's how we're thinking about investing is for the late stage stuff, it can be kind of a onesie, twosie marginal improvement, but we got to go prove it. For the earlier stage stuff, there'll be a portion of the portfolio probably smaller, but that's got to be something really big, something really novel and highly innovative.
So the message here for the early stage innovators is take a big swing and not look to incremental advancements. I think at least if you're pitching VCs, there may be other investors that would be interested, but at least for this audience, you need to be taking big swings at the early stage.
Yeah, I'd add one more thing, good kind of anecdote. One of our portfolio companies, Ian Trek, it's a device going after MIGS, but what they did was really interesting is they found a really fast way to do a 510K approval to get into market really fast. Didn't need to raise that much money, didn't have to do a PMA. And so that's an interesting way to go after a market that's maybe already well commoditized, but something that can be better. They found a really unique way to get to market fast and without a lot of capital. So if you're a marginal improvement, it's got to be a really streamlined regulatory process or very little capital to get there.
Perfect, thank you. Mayssa, how does venture math factor into B&L's decisions when assessing investment, partnership, acquisition opportunities, if at all? Where do you think about entering relative to the dollars that have gone in? And do you even think about whether or not the existing investors need a return, or are you just looking at the bottom line for you?
So it's a complicated question, so let me break it down. So first of all, I want to build on what Garrett just said. And what you said about the big swings. We are not afraid, when you think of venture math, risk. If we have conviction in the asset, in the team, we will invest and we will partner. So that's first point. Second point, in terms of what the other folks have to do in terms of their return on investment, I don't know how much we think about that. We're aware of it. For us, our return on investment is around again, the asset itself. And so that's where sometimes we are a little bit different than other investors. We're not, and that's why we actually like to go in early, because you see some of the decisions are about getting to that next stage gate, that exit, that whatever. For us, it's about, does this solve something for patients? And do we think we can be commercially successful with it? And are we the right people to own the asset or partner with the asset? So again, when it comes to how much capital has been raised, it's something, again, we take note of because it's validating to our own assessment of the asset. Having said that, we have gone into partnerships where we were the first to place a bet, because if something is truly innovative, you want to believe we have the eyes to identify it first. And then the valuation, That we do think about. I think sometimes some valuations today are a little unrealistic, and just having that conversation with teams can be a little challenging, but we will have it.
As a quick follow-up to that, what percentage of those challenging elevated valuations are a hangover from a previous era or just based on false expectations in the market?
That's a good question because both come into play. I think the majority are actually false expectations. And if there was a piece of advice I would give, have your optimistic valuation that you think you're at, but maybe also have a more realistic one as well.
I'd agree with that. Solicit feedback and take it seriously. Mike, Boost model seems designed to limit the amount of capital raised at the early stage. Can you share why this is important and a bit about your model?
Yeah, first, let's scoot over. It's weird having this
Yeah,
one.
I agree. I agree.
So Boost is a little bit different. How many innovators are in the room? And you all think it's hard to raise money for your business. Try raising money for a fund right now. Like, that's very, very difficult to do. And Boost is a little bit different because, like you, we take very early bets. In fact, we are always, most likely, we are always first money in. We're the first ones to take that bet. But our venture economics are a little bit different. We're not looking to. I mean, we're gonna stay with it the whole way. But Octane is part of an ecosystem. We're kind of our own ecosystem in many ways, and we'll talk about that. So we bring a lot of resources to help these startups. But our venture economics are, we are first dollars in. We don't write checks to entrepreneurs. We write checks to experts who can help actually build those businesses. We don't want a $50,000 logo with the first money in as entrepreneurs are trying to figure out how to build their businesses. So we try to be helpful and try to be intentional where the dollars go. And then we look for a 0.5x return at the A round. So we will be non-dilutive until the A round, and then we will have a liquidity preference at the A round to take a little bit of money off the table so that the LPs, many of the folks in this room who would join us on a journey like that, would get a return at the A round, but hold for the rest of it so that we can do this again. So we like to work on research. We like to work on what's happening on the back of a napkin. Where are you thinking? Where are you innovating inside of your practice or what you're doing? Those are the bets that we'll take. But we're going to take a liquidity preference at the A round because we know the story that has just been told here, getting all the way to an exit, 10% to get through clinical, try to get all the way to the exit. It's a low probability, but we believe in innovation. We want to support it. We are tip of the spear, and we will be first money. And it's bold capital for sure, high risk, bold capital.
Appreciate that. So what I'm hearing a lot of us talk about, and I'm going to skip around a bit in the interest of time, is the ecosystem, right? And how you're, I don't want to get dinged like others, and how you're thinking about the innovation ecosystem, right? And from very early stage to later stage commercial, and how we all work together and can work together. I think if you look at kind of the model of what any innovation ecosystem is, everyone looks at Silicon Valley. Emmett, as a founder of OIS, you played an instrumental role in creating and fostering this ecosystem, which has been so important for ophthalmic innovation. What lessons did you learn in building OIS, and what role can ecosystems play in nurturing startups in a capital-starved environment?
They're important. That's the bottom line is we all come to these sorts of meetings to hear the latest, to see the newest, and to have an opportunity to, if you're an investor, to invest, or if you're an operator, to join those teams and help them get across the finish line. I do think these sort of ecosystems are tremendously important.
Thank you. Mayssa, for industry partners, there's obviously a critical role in fostering sustainable ecosystems, from sponsoring conferences like this to investing and acquiring the startups, and then that capital is obviously recycled through us, the investors. To what extent do you have dialogue with your counterparts at other large industry partners, and is there room for additional collaboration to support early stage innovation?
So there are forums and different types of meetings where we do talk with our industry collaborators. When we invest in companies and we sit on boards, sometimes we're not the only strategic, so there's another opportunity. But I actually think this is something where industry could probably do a better job of, in some type of pre-competitive way, work together to support the ecosystem. Because again, going back to those early stage bets, a lot of the times you want to get in early is because you want to give that partner company access to some of the resource and experience in the companies. And so how we better support innovation is a really good question, maybe an opportunity to help the R&D productivity that pharma does have.
Yeah, I think that's something we think about a lot, is like how can we, as investors, help the R&D issue and help industry as well. So maybe that's a topic we can take up again at OIS Ignite later this year, and have that discussion and maybe lead to some concrete steps forward. Garrett, visionary in the ecosystem you're part of, as Mike mentioned, Octane and Orange County is an example of what ecosystems can do when they work together. What can key stakeholders do better to foster a nationwide ophthalmology ecosystem?
That's a tough one. I guess the way we've been attacking it is kind of being an aggregator of kind of all the knowledge, and through our fund we have about 90 key opinion leading ophthalmologists that are investors, and so through that we have a great network of deal flow, but also our ability to kind of give back in a kind of consulting sense to a lot of these startup companies. We don't invest in everything we look at, but we try to give back advice on how to progress things forward, what their next trial could look like, what that design could look like, how they could de-risk the regulatory pathway where they could then be an investable asset down the road. So I think that's something we're doing, but as far as what we could do, I think more broadly as an industry, I think it is interfacing with strategic, saying, what assets do you want, what's going to fit in your portfolio, making sure we're investing in the right things that ultimately could have a home, I think is important, because there's a lot of innovation out there where we just kind of scratch our heads and say, well, where is this going to end up? How's this going to fit? So we have to be really thoughtful about how we do that, how we seed things, how we kind of fund things through all the clinical trials and where it can ultimately sit. That's kind of, but yeah, it's a tough problem.
Yep. All right, so I wasn't the only one to notice it. We need to figure out what to do about it. Mike, Boost, like visionaries and outgrowth of Octane, though not ophthalmic specific, what plans do you have to leverage the ecosystem around you and bring to bear on some of the companies you're investing in?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and this is kind of relevant to all of us here today. I mean, this is where we live every single day at Octane and at OIS. It's about connecting the ecosystem. But let me say this: an ecosystem on its own has no inherent value for an innovator. An innovator is like, I use a crude analogy here. It's like Neo in the Matrix without Morpheus, or you don't have the red pill that kind of tells you, hey, there's a reality and you need to work through. I've had 3 startups. I'm on my 4th, in addition to what I do here. And if I had known on my first startup the ecosystem that was available to me and how to navigate it, I'd have moved much faster. I successfully sold private equity. It was a 24-year journey for me. And we probably would have accelerated that. I would have been less diluted. And so that pathway of how do you work with an ecosystem, that's where we live. That's where the value is. Garrett talks about all these LPs. What an incredible opportunity to have experts who live in your domain talking about, can you commercialize this? Do I see this working in my practice? Is this something that I think is viable? What does that roadmap look like? But that's also just the tip. We're capital sources. That's just a part of it. You think about the expertise on regulatory. Who's helping you on regulatory? Or is it, there's a lot of hubris, I think, with entrepreneurs when they first get started. I'm going to start this, I'm going to build this, I'm going to take it all the way to commercialization and eventually to exit. That's just a story that doesn't happen. I mean, it's very, very rare that you can take it all the way through. So if you have an ecosystem behind you where they can bring resources in, I mean, I love the story we just heard about neurotech, and I mean, I will tell you from probably the capital source, I don't know if you guys are all seeing the same thing, but I'm thinking to myself, oh yeah, another story of just constant roadblocks and barriers. And you know what entrepreneurs do really well, innovators do really well, is they troubleshoot and they pivot. But if you have trusted advisors or groups around you who are experts who are helping you, Kaufman did a study on this, you have a 30% greater success on pivots when you have trusted advisors with domain expertise who are helping you in those pivots. And so leaning into an ecosystem is one part, but knowing how to access it, I think, is the big role that we all can play.
Talking about ecosystems, Emmett mentioned, life sciences will not be what the tech ecosystem is. We're not going to have those types of outcomes. But are there other lessons we can learn from what the tech ecosystem does well, right? And can we adapt models from that sector to ensure better outcomes for all, optimizing the chances that new technologies will reach patients? Some of these are scout funds. So for instance, in the tech ecosystem, a big fund may employ a smaller individual to go out and scout investments for them and give them a piece of the carry. Emmett, Silicon Valley, your backyard, remains the blueprint for these venture ecosystems, even life sciences. With capital concentration occurring and the mega funds occurring at the top end of the life science ecosystem, it seems like an idea that perhaps should we explore scout funds at some of the larger funds, and will it ever work, or will it ever be applicable, and what are some of the issues in applying the scout fund model to the life science ecosystem?
Again, not a term I typically hear, scout fund, but I hear seed fund, accelerators, and they are all out there. They've been out there for a long time, and they have their role, and I think that they're good. I don't have enough expertise in tech to really start to do the comparison, but if I may take a little bit of a tangent and talk about another aspect of the ecosystem that I think is critical, and I think Maureen and Craig would support this because we've talked about it all the time. The anchor to OIS was always industry. I think it's 80%, 70% of the meeting is industry. These are people and companies that are almost always siloed almost by mandate from their own management. So they can't talk to other companies. They can't talk really to innovators outside of a BD context. But here they come and here they talk. This is where they leave that company. They go to startups. And so the anchor has always been industry. And it's really important. These sorts of meetings give a venue for industry more than anybody else. And then others come to learn and see what they want. They're the ultimate customer in a way before we get to the patient, because they have to take it across the finish line. So I just wanted to make that point, that without these sorts of meetings, you get to this situation where there are these huge divides and people don't talk openly to each other.
I would kind of pile in on that, and there's an example that we're familiar with Ravana Therapeutics. We kind of had some challenges we were working through, and it was through our network that we talked to someone that referred us to someone that said, oh, this guy, Patrick, actually is a photochemist. He's got this experience, and plugged him into the company as a consultant. Now he's the COO and helped propel the company forward quite nicely. And that's the power of the network. And it's corny to say your net worth is your network. And I always kind of laughed at that a long time ago as kind of not being true. But as I've gotten further into my career and further into venture capital, how important that really is. It's kind of the underpinning of what a VC firm is. It's having this broad network of all these different people. It's not just your investors, but all the different regulatory advisors, scientists, whoever they may be, and being able to tap into them and bring them to bear, because that's really where the magic happens.
Perfect segue to Mayssa. How do we encourage industry to break down those silos and discuss more openly, other than in meetings with individuals, and say, hey, we're looking at this early stage investment. Is this something you might be interested in either now or later? Is there a way to break down those silos and encourage more collaboration and discussion, or is just the nature of the beast with larger companies preventative of that?
So I think different companies have different cultures and different views. And so perhaps the most effective way is to target those industry partners that have a track record and a management team that recognizes the value of being a member of the ecosystem. And there's that old adage that I think we've beat out because it's so unsuccessful, the not invented here mentality. But you really do want to look for those industry partners, and not to tout Bausch and Lomb too much, but I do think our CEO has been a very important advocate of the role of the ecosystem and the role of smaller companies being a source of innovation. And so I think what we could do is maybe VCs could target those industry partners to somehow find a way to collaborate that could then be pointed to see the value of doing it this way, that then could maybe influence some of the other industry partners. I have been at other companies where actually the walls are pretty high up. And it's really because, and I think the bigger you get, the more likely that is, because they do have their own resources and they do have their own views, that it's hard to believe a smaller company can really know what they're doing, even though, of course, they can. So I guess maybe it's building on success. So maybe, I guess, first strategically find the right industry partners to work together with the right type of project, demonstrate success, and then influence from there. Because it's absolutely needed, and I do agree with what you said, Emmett, we need these types of forums because they're critical, and the network is everything.
I'm really encouraged by the amount of agreement and the issues we're identifying and the desire to find solutions. Speaking of solutions, Mike, service providers are a key part of kind of healthy innovation ecosystems. Can you share about how you're leveraging the different service providers instead of making a direct investment?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we reached out to, 40 different growth service providers across 13 different functional areas this is what's required to properly stand up a company and get it supported. And then what we did was we negotiated with them to build roadmaps. So we're investing in roadmaps, not the execution of strategy. That's obviously very expensive, but these experts will build roadmaps. So I'll just give you an example. For IP with a company, we might connect with Kenobi Martin. And so we'll write a check to Kenobi to do patent research. They outsource that, right? I just found out, but that's okay. We get good quality pedigree to back it up. On a regulatory roadmap, we work with a global CRO or one of many global CROs. Go to market, we're gonna help with that. Market size, market research. So we don't do that on our own. We're too small for that. So we go to the experts. And really it came down to this. It's when no innovator loses an investment opportunity during the pitch, because they're all amazing. You've seen the pitches that have come today. They're great stories. You lose the investment opportunity when you can't answer a question that's being asked by folks who understand the journey you're about to go on, and you really don't know how to get there. Now there's some questions. So we think the better answer is when you ask, what's your regulatory roadmap? What's this look like for you? Before I answer that question, let me tell you about the global CRO who wrote our roadmap. They're relevant, they have domain expertise, they've got 6 guys that come from the FDA. That's a way more, in our opinion, it's a stronger presentation, and it demonstrates that you brought in the right pedigree and that you're open to, you're coachable. We talk about that a lot. But anyway, that's how we leverage it.
That also reminds me of the tech ecosystem where they blog and open source a lot of the development roadmaps, right? And even the safe documents and VCA docs, right? Which have really expedited
Y Combinator is an incredible resource for that.
Exactly. So with our 2 minutes remaining, any parting shots from our panelists? Emmett, starting with you.
No. What would I say? I would say I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be an amazing decade for innovation. The financing is going to be a different issue, but the scientific innovation is poised to be really unparalleled. Multifunctional molecules, non-viral gene therapy, cell-based therapies. They're having their challenges now, but you will see they will emerge as real therapies, and it'll be an amazing decade.
I think what we've seen recently in the last year or so on venture capital, broadly tech and life science, there's been a reduction in the number of VC firms by, I think, -20%, -30%, and similar reduction in the amount of capital available. So it's challenging out there. But I will contrast, I was saying, you see very large, really impactful financings getting done for those really big ideas. So there is capital out there. There's capital looking for things to finance that are impactful and meaningful. So when you're thinking about going down this pathway of starting a company, make sure it's something that has some real heft to it. And those things, if you do them well, if you design them the right way, there will always be capital to finance those.
Got it. Mayssa.
I think what I would say is we all know we're all getting older and we're going to be around for a lot longer. And so to have that good quality of life, we need vision. So ophthalmology is a great place to be. And for those companies, there will always be strategics that have fantastic commercial teams that are looking for assets. So think about how you partner, think about that end game, and how you build an asset to go across the finish line that's really innovative, solves a problem. You will find the money.
Got it.
Yeah, two things. One, if you're an innovator, on behalf of all of us up here, I would say thank you for swinging for these fences. Thank you for everyone who's here. Thank you for the sacrifices that you're making. This is very, very tough, and you're on a really, challenging journey, but the world needs what you have. The world needs your innovation, your ideas. And I will say this, do your homework. Align yourself properly. If you are look at Visionary Ventures and look at what they have funded in the past. Understand their portfolio, because if you align with their portfolio, they may say no, but they probably have resources that can help you. They'll guide you in the right way. I know Jeff and Garrett are very open to helping. Talk to a strategic and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Does this align with your strategic vision? Most of the time, you'll get an answer back. Again, they may not invest, but we find that the strategics in these ecosystems are actually very open to being supportive and helpful. So those are my two thoughts.
Thank you all. And I think what you're hearing from everyone is that we're very supportive of innovation, even if we can't always write a check. Emmett mentioned the lack of financing out there, but certainly it's not because there aren't opportunities for it. So listen, I really appreciate all the panelists, appreciate everyone being here, and hopefully we can continue this discussion at OIS Ignite later this year and maybe break down some of those silos. Thank you.